Let me start off by saying hello. I'm Myleene Klass. I am delighted to welcome you all to Tommy's Miscarriage Matters event. Now, let me just give you a little reminder. This event is going to be recorded, or it is being recorded right now, for those who couldn't make it. And Tommy's will be sharing snippets on their social media channels. Now, we can't see you, and any questions that you submit, they're going to be completely anonymous, but please do bear in mind, do not include any personal information about yourselves in your questions. And also, I think this is the right time as well, just to give you, I suppose it's a trigger warning. If you find anything whatsoever that is being discussed difficult to hear, please feel free just to drop off the call. Conversations about miscarriage, they can trigger a very strong emotional response, and it can be a case of that you're going through it right now, for which, if that is the case, I am truly sorry. Or it could be something that might have happened to you many years ago. No experience is the same, but if it did happen some time ago, it can still be triggering. Now, this is meant to be a safe space, and the last thing that we want is to upset anyone whatsoever. So, like I said, welcome and thank you for joining us today. So let's begin, shall we? Now, last year, leading researchers from Tommy's National Centre for Miscarriage Research published a groundbreaking series in the Lancet, which laid bare the devastating impact of miscarriage, the scale of the issue, and how care needs to change to better help and support families. Now, the current system, it isn't working, and families, they are still suffering greatly. So first up, women must currently experience 3 miscarriages in a row before they can access any support. Now, I know this firsthand. We think this is wrong. Parents should be entitled to support after every single miscarriage. Secondly, access to miscarriage care can vary depending on where you live. It shouldn't be a postcode lottery. 3, nobody knows how many miscarriages take place in this country overall, because we don't record it consistently and bring those records together into a single place. They are not consolidated. So whereas we know how many, sadly, stillbirths happen, no one can actually still tell us how many pregnancies end in miscarriage. Now, this means we don't understand the scale of the problem, and we can't tell if the support that we have put in place is working or if it isn't. And we also can't set targets to bring the numbers down. Now, the good news is over 250,000 people have signed Tommy's petition calling for change last summer. A debate on miscarriage was held in Parliament shortly afterwards, led by Olivia Blake MP, with the government committing to include miscarriage care in the new Women's Health Strategy. Now, this is the government's plan for how to make sure women's health issues are recognised and supported over the next 10 years. Now, since then, we have been working tirelessly to make miscarriage care a priority. And I'm just going to share a little bit about what has been personally going on in my life and what I've been doing with regards to this, because actually, I said it was good news about the people who have signed the petition. It's phenomenal. Clearly, there are a lot of people calling for this change, but sadly, since I made the miscarriage documentary that some of you might have seen, called Myleene Klass, Miscarriage and Me, since Olivia Blake very bravely spoke up in Parliament and addressed Nadine Dorries, who was the health minister then, who then promised to look and address the miscarriage matter situation. She has now moved on and been replaced by a different health minister, Maria Caulfield, and the momentum has very sadly just disappeared. Now, I took a roundtable with Olivia Blake in Parliament only last week, and we are just trying to get the agenda of miscarriage back onto a platform, onto the table in front of people like Maria to address this. I can't believe in this day and age that we are even having to draw attention to this, but I think no one is surprised as to what is going on in the world to hear that it isn't always necessarily going our way, very much the opposite. And that's why we need to make more noise, apply more pressure and speak up and get these changes implemented. And that's where we need your help. We need signatures, we need support, we need names, we need that pressure, we need our voices heard. And on a personal note, I've been through 4 miscarriages. Oh, it's still so difficult to talk about it because they're very painful. But I just want you to know this is a safe space, and I do understand the pain of what you're going through, and I understand what it does to a family. It can be very, very painful indeed. And to have a doctor say to you that we can't help you until you've had 3 recurring miscarriages, which I thought it's not possibly going to happen, because I was told that after my first miscarriage. It turned out that I ended up having 4. I also did get some medical support, which we will go into later, because we have some incredible professors on the line. And if I hadn't had that medical intervention, I don't think I would have my son. So nobody more so than me knows the importance of having miscarriage care support, and nobody more so than my family, my partner, my children, and myself, and my friends who've been through this, because it turns out one person only has to talk about miscarriage before the floodgates then open, because everyone else feels, is the word brave enough, or that it's not so much of a taboo, or that you can speak about it. The shame can just disappear a little bit. It just takes, these conversations to happen. I just want you to know that I know what it feels like. So as I said, this is a very safe space, and let's get to all of your questions and talking to our professors as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the team. We've got Centre Director Professor Arri Coomarasamy and Deputy Director Professor Siobhan Quenby. They've both said I can call them by their first names. I told them if I was a professor, I'd want Professor, but they've been very friendly about it. Also joining us is Tommy's Chief Executive, Kath Abrahams, also phenomenal, lovely lady. So we are amongst friends here. Arri, so let's start with you, please. Could you start by briefly reminding us of the Lancet Miscarriage Matters research findings, please?
Thank you, Myleene. Thank you, first of all, for sharing your experience so openly. One of the problems we've had with miscarriage is that there has been so much silence around miscarriage, silence from those who suffer, from family members, from healthcare providers, and so on. And unless we speak and share, we can't make things better. So thank you for that. And also thank you for giving a great summary of where we are. And now to answer the question, yes, we felt it was necessary for us to bring together the various threads, the evidence, the consultations, the consensus, the guidance, all of that together into one body of work, so that we can pursue miscarriage care, service, and research in a meaningful way. So we did that by producing 3 articles which were published in the Lancet in April 2021. And these 3 articles really defined the landscape of where we are with miscarriage and what needs to be done. And really what we found was that miscarriages are massively misunderstood. There are lots of misconceptions about miscarriage, and these misunderstandings were really damaging to women and couples. So if I could sum up the kind of 6 key messages from the Lancet series. The first was the misconception that miscarriage isn't very common. We know it's extremely common. We looked at large studies, 9 of them. They had more than 4 million observations. And what we found was that 15% of pregnancies end in a miscarriage. So just about everyone out there will know someone who's had a miscarriage. It's that common, such a big problem. The second misconception is that miscarriage is a minor event. It's not a minor event for those who suffer miscarriages. We know that there is the physical side of miscarriage, but there are many other issues that are there for those who suffer miscarriage. So the first is the recurrence risk. We know that a woman who's had 1 miscarriage is at greater risk of having future miscarriages. And the larger the number of previous miscarriages, the greater the risk of future miscarriage. But it doesn't end there. Even if the woman doesn't have a miscarriage in the future and the pregnancy continues, we know that there can be obstetric risks to that woman. So complications like preterm birth, growth restriction, stillbirth, these are all increased in women who've had previous miscarriages. We also know that there is huge mental health burden in women and couples who've suffered miscarriages. So anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide risk, these are all higher in women who've had miscarriages. So it's not a minor event at all. You know, it's minimized by many people, but it's not a minor event. The third key finding is that people have been treating miscarriage as an isolated event. You know, it happens, you get over it, you know, you will have a baby and so on. But we know that there are lifelong consequences. You know, I discussed the mental health issues already, but we know that even the health of the woman may be affected if there's a history of miscarriage. So we know that conditions like cardiovascular disease are higher in women who have had miscarriages. Venous thromboembolism, clots in the legs and chest, these are higher. These are serious conditions. And recently there was an important study that found even the risk of stroke is higher in women who've had previous miscarriages. And again, the larger the number of previous miscarriages, the greater the risk. So this is the third issue, that we cannot treat miscarriage as an isolated event. The fourth key finding was that miscarriage care is very limited. For something as profound as this, there is very little care out there, and it is hugely fragmented. And Myleene, you mentioned the fact that you have to have 3 miscarriages before you would receive care, and that is totally scandalous. That should never be the case, but that's how bad the care is. That's how limited and fragmented the care is. So this was the fourth key finding. The fifth key finding is that miscarriage doesn't affect everyone the same way. We know that there are, you know, some women who are at greater risk. For example, women of Black ethnicity are at greater risk. And this is where we really need to understand why this is the case and start to address the differences in health outcomes amongst various groups of women. And the research that Tommy's does and the investment that Tommy's makes is absolutely vital for us to understand why this is the case and start to address the reasons for the differences. And the sixth key finding is perhaps one of the most important one, and that is that there is this pervasive idea out there that miscarriage is one of those things. You can't do anything about it. It's nature's way of dealing with a pregnancy that is not normal. It is true, some miscarriages are of pregnancies which are not normal, but there are many, many, many miscarriages which are loss of a fetus that is completely normal. And we now know that there is so much that can be done to prevent a miscarriage. So, you know, the progesterone hormone can be useful in many women. Blood thinning drugs like aspirin and heparin can be useful in some women. And the idea that we can't do anything about miscarriage has to be challenged. There is a lot that can be done to provide better care and improve outcomes. So really key findings. The challenge now, of course, taking these findings and recommendations to bedside, you know, to every woman who suffers miscarriage, and making sure that we get the best outcome possible for every woman, and carry out the research and develop the services that deliver the best possible care for every woman who has a miscarriage.
Thank you so much for everything that you've said there, because I mean, I related to everything that you said. I heard a lot of those. I felt very dismissed at many points. You know, at least you can get pregnant. I can't keep the baby. This is just nature's way. But it's extremely cruel because I'm completely helpless. And then you're talking about the drugs that you can potentially take, and the drugs that you mentioned, I took them from blood thinners through to progesterone, and that was with my son's pregnancy. So there's a lot of women who feel completely helpless out there, and yet this new graded model that the Lancet is proposing, this is going to help a lot of families. That's correct, isn't it?
Absolutely, Myleene. And I think one of the key messages that we should put out as individuals who have a great concern for women who suffer miscarriages is that, you know, please seek care, seek help, and there is a lot that can be done. And the graded model we think, is a reasonable way to take matters forward. And what graded model means is that the care is graded by the number of miscarriages that you've had. So if you've had, say, 1 miscarriage, then we want to know if there is any reason for why you had that miscarriage, whether we can make matters better for you by looking at your lifestyle, your diet, your body mass index, and so on, and see if there are any medical problems which need to be addressed. What's your vitamin D level? Are you taking folate? All these things are really important. Now, if you've had 2 miscarriages, then things are getting serious now. So I think we need to increase the level of care, and we think a care by a nurse or midwife-led clinic, where we are able to do some basic investigations, looking at your thyroid function, looking at your blood hemoglobin level, looking for any medical conditions that need to be addressed, and so on, becomes important. If you've had 3 or more miscarriages, then there are other additional tests we need to do. So, for example, are there any problems with your blood? Antiphospholipid syndrome, for example, any problems with the uterus. So we would need to carry out additional tests. And then we have the truly heartbreaking situation of women who've had very large number of miscarriages, 5 or more, for example. Such patients need to seek care in highly specialized clinics where we can really dig deeper to find out what exactly is going on that's giving the repeated heartache of such large number of miscarriages. So graded model is what we are proposing, and this has been endorsed by the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which is great. Now the challenge is to make this happen throughout.
It's so frustrating, because if you said doctors are behind this, obviously women are behind this, and families, and the Royal College of Obs and Gynaes are behind this. We just need the government to get behind this.
Absolutely.
Come on, guys. And also, thank you so much again. You're addressing really important issues there. I would also like to add into that, there's the paternal side of things that they can look into testing wise as well. It's not all on the woman. And also from a mental health perspective, my auntie took part in the documentary that I made, and she had her miscarriage 40 years ago, and it still affects her. It still affects her today. So that just shows you the impact. You talked about PTSD. They say it's the same level of PTSD as a soldier returning from Afghanistan 9 months later. The irony, 9 months later. Thank you so much, Arri. And thank you so much. I've got so many questions. They're flooding through. If you'd like to submit a question to the team, please just pop it in the event Q&A box, and we will select these as we continue our discussion. Siobhan, could you speak to us, please? Tell us a little bit about what has changed since last year. I was delighted to hear progesterone should now be more freely available. I didn't even know that this was a thing you could take, and I ended up taking so much of it.
So the major change has been that progesterone is now being put in the NICE guidelines. So that means it's accepted treatment for prevention of miscarriage. However, there has been a problem in going from the NICE guidelines to making it easy for patients to get. So I think the only thing that we can do at the moment is really empower patients and make sure you're aware of that. So the reason it's in the NICE guidelines is because of the fantastic trials led by my colleague Arri, who you've just heard talk, and also because of Tommy's support in getting this in the guidelines. So what this means is if you've had just 1 miscarriage and you're pregnant again and you're bleeding in early pregnancy, progesterone increases the chance of you having a baby by 5%. Now, I think that's a massive deal. This isn't a cure. It's not going to stop everyone miscarrying, but it increases your chance of having a baby 5%. That's a massive deal to my patients. The frustration is that if you then go to a general practitioner and ask for it, a lot of general practitioners won't give it. And a lot of early pregnancy units don't stock it out of hours. So it's a matter of lots of campaigning to get this message through to make it easily available for everyone. But I think if you do go to a general practitioner and point out it is in the NICE guidelines and you're empowered to say, that increases your chance of having a baby 5%, I think it's then very difficult for them not to give it to you. One of our major things is to empower women through Tommy's.
Can I just jump in there, Myleene? Just really briefly to say, sorry, just that we've got some great information on our website to help you if you want to go and talk to your GP or your health practitioner about it. So something that you can read and take with you that will help you specifically around progesterone. Sorry, Myleene.
No, thank you. Look, please just jump in, all the information that we can get. Siobhan, I read somewhere that this can help save 8,500 babies' lives every year. That's how powerful it is. That could be your baby.
Yeah, I mean, this is massive. So that's if you do the calculations as to how many people would be bleeding in early pregnancy, and if they all had the progesterone they should have, it would save literally thousands and thousands of babies each year. So at the moment, it's a time to really get the message out there. And absolutely, the Tommy's charity is powerful. It has very high quality information on its website, and that's how to get it, is to go that method.
Oh, we mentioned earlier, so there's progesterone and there's blood. Do you know what? I'm currently sitting in my room, and in my drawer, this is in my drawer. You recognise these from having to take blood thinners, heparin or Plexin, the progesterones, the aspirins. I've still got everything left over, and this was for me, 3-4 years ago. It still surrounds us. It's all around us. It's in my drawer as I sit talking to you now. This is most definitely something that women should be looking into and asking their health practitioners for. Thank you so much, Siobhan. Arri, I'm just going to come to you again about the importance of mental health support. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because so many women, myself included, you're trying so much from the physical side of things just to get pregnant and then hold on to that pregnancy that you don't necessarily realize what it is doing to your mental health. I don't feel I'll ever be the same ever again anyway. I feel like I've been to war with my own body.
Absolutely. In the past, I used to ask women who've had miscarriages, do you have a name for the pregnancy that you lost? And often they would refer to the pregnancy as a baby that they lost, and they would have a name. So I think it's really important to recognize, although with miscarriages, they happen very earlier on in pregnancy, these are hopes and dreams and aspirations dashed. And, for women who've suffered and couples who've suffered a miscarriage, it was the loss of a person that they started to bond. So it shouldn't surprise us that, when there is that loss, there is, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and even suicide risk. All of these go up. I think what has been studied most probably is PTSD, and our colleagues at Imperial have been doing great work on that. And as you very rightly pointed out, Myleene, the level of distress from PTSD is no different to a soldier who is returning from a battlefield, and that should give an idea about how bad matters are. And about 20% of women have that after about 9 months from that they have the miscarriage. But the problem is hardly addressed, so these women don't get the support that they need. What we think needs to be done is that we need to develop a way of identifying women who are at risk of mental health issues after a miscarriage. So we need to have a questionnaire or tools that allow us to identify women who need that support. And we need to be able to roll this out nationally. Women who have had miscarriages, they need to be screened, and those who are at risk of having serious mental health issues need to be identified early so that they can be supported. So we need to have a questionnaire or tool that needs to be rolled out across the nation, and then those who are at high risk of having mental health consequences need to be supported with the appropriate services. So a lot needs to be done, and we are very much working on that at the moment with Tommy's charity to ensure that such tools exist and that the women are identified if they are at risk, and then they are supported appropriately if they are at risk.
Thank you. There's one lady that I spoke to who on one particular weekend had her mother and father-in-law coming down to take the nursery apart because she tried so many times, and after her 5th miscarriage she realized that she was going to turn the nursery into an office, but she couldn't take the wallpaper down. And I just think that's a very visual, very visceral image, because as you say, you have nothing else to show but these hopes and dreams, and to then have to, it's very symbolic, have to take that nursery down and pull it apart. She couldn't do it, and it was then left to what would have been the grandparents to do it, who obviously found it very painful too. But it just shows you the extent it affects the entire family. It's not just something that you can just move on so easily from. So thank you for taking it so seriously and acknowledging what women are going through. Siobhan, I have to ask you, I hear that you're now working on a new project to help families understand their risk of miscarriage. Now, recurrent miscarriage, obviously it's devastating, but it's terrifying. Every time I found out I was pregnant, I didn't even want to go to the loo. I was so scared because I just thought I would see blood every single time. It's terrifying. So how is this designed to help?
So the idea is that we're going to have an app that empowers people and gives people more information. So that is exactly the issue we're trying to solve, this fear. So a lot of people are actually so frightened of miscarrying again, they actually don't seek medical help, particularly we think disadvantaged populations and people from Black ethnicity. And to try and encourage them to seek help, we're going to have an app where you put your information into a Tommy's calculator, and that's going to say high risk of miscarriage or low risk of miscarriage, or high risk of having problems conceiving again, or low risk of conceiving again, and so whether you should seek medical help. It's also going to be backed up with a telephone line, so that if you write things in the app that suggest that you need it, then the Tommies have appointed some midwives who can ring you up and give you counselling. So I'm really hoping this is going to reach people who at the moment don't seek medical help. The reason I'm so enthusiastic about this app is that one of the things people most frequently say to me in the clinic is, I'm sure I'm never going to have a baby. I just want you to tell me that I can never have a baby. And I'm quite shocked at that, to be actually that scared. You're trying to discuss with them all the things you can do, all the things you can help with. And they still expect me to do a test that says you can never have a baby again. That's where people come from. And if people have come from that low, horrible, dark place, it's actually very difficult to encourage them, because it's an awful long way to move, psychologically from I'm hopeless to, oh no, there's lots of good things. Yes, there are things we can do. Yes, we can help you to have a baby. So I'm hoping that they will use this app first of all. And then when they interact with the medical profession, they feel empowered. You're going to see the doctor. The doctor's going to give you things. The doctor's going to give you support. There are things we can do to help you get there. And that's the difference we want this app to make.
Honestly, it's just wonderful to hear you say that. Like I said, I mentioned my auntie 40 years ago, she never tried again because she said the experience was so horrific, she couldn't go through it again. And there's a lot of women that feel that way. They're so terrified, and what they need is information, something that they can do something with, something tangible, even if it's, like I said before, looking at right across their life experiences all the way through to even their partner. Like, you don't feel so isolated. Like I said, paternal age and how they live their life as well comes into it, which is something I just did not know at the time. I thought it was all me. I thought it was all on me. Do correct me if there's anything I'm saying that's incorrect here, Siobhan.
No, that's absolutely right. It's also very important to include the partners, because they often are equally traumatized by the loss, and sometimes even more traumatized because they feel guilty if they got their partner pregnant and then caused the grief and pain and suffering. So it's really important that these are things that people can use as couples, and receive counselling as couples. That's exactly what we hope this is going to do.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Arri. Thank you, Siobhan. I said that we had lots of questions that were waiting here, so I'm just going to look here. So Arri, there's a question here for you. Are you doing any research looking into miscarriages that happen later in pregnancy?
Yes, that's a really important question. So when we talk of miscarriages, often we refer to early miscarriages that occur in the first 14 weeks. And the care is improving for that, which is great news. And a lot of that is because of the energy and drive that has come from the Tommy's charity to see improvement in early miscarriage care. And there is reasonable care for stillbirth. Now, in the middle of those two are losses that happen in the mid-trimester. So from, say, about 14 weeks to about 24 weeks of pregnancy. And the care there has been extremely minimal. Again, it's very fragmented. Depending on where you live in the country, you would get very different level of care. Our center, Tommy's Center in Manchester, has been doing some work on that, and we are now working with them and other Tommy's centers to address the mid-trimester or later pregnancy miscarriages. And what's important there is that we are gathering all the evidence. We are putting together a guideline which would again define the landscape of care that is out there and perhaps what we should be aspiring to. But there is much work to be done there too.
There really is. Kath, I've got a question here for you. How important do you think it is that employers support those experiencing miscarriage?
Oh my goodness, Myleene, so important. If you think about how much time a lot of us spend at work, you know, the idea that you're in an environment where you can't talk about what's happened to you, or your employer doesn't understand that you need time off, for example, to grieve, it's incredibly important, because it's such, as you've talked so eloquently and inspiringly about, it's such a major life event for somebody. So we've got a thing that we're doing with employers actually called Pregnancy and Parenting at Work, and it's kind of model that we're working with employers on to encourage them to provide all the right kind of things for people so that they get the support they need. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important. As miscarriage becomes something, we hope through things like the work we've done through the Lancet becomes something that's a bit more talked about, then potentially it becomes a little, you know, we hope it becomes a little bit easier and there's a little bit of the taboo that's taken away. But we know how traumatizing it is for people. So it's incredibly important employers recognise that.
I remember after my first miscarriage, I had to sit at work in between two pregnant women. It was actual torture. And it brought out the worst feelings I can imagine. You can imagine. And I wasn't jealous of their babies, like those were their babies, but I wanted my baby. And I think anyone who's been through a miscarriage will understand that it's very difficult to see a pregnant woman. And if you're at work and you're sitting next to them, and it brings up all kinds of feelings. And I was making baby clothes at the time, so
terrible.
Holding clothes that I knew would never dress my baby.
So difficult. And I think one of the things that people find hard is, you know, people often don't know what to say in the face of grief. You know, they don't know what's best to say, and often as a result of that, people say nothing. So one of the things that we really encourage, you know, employers and others to do is say something. You know, whatever you say to kind of reach out to people will be a good thing to do, but that kind of silence that people exist in can often be one of the hardest things.
Sure. Although I think there should be a list of things that they shouldn't say. Like,
I'm sure.
Try again. It was only
absolutely.
It wasn't even a baby. I mean, we all heard those as well. So yeah, we need more
totally.
Guidelines. You're absolutely right, Kath. We need more guidelines for employers and just general life, I would say. Siobhan, here's a question for you. It can be hard to access GPs and get them to take you seriously after miscarriage, especially when there's so much pressure on the NHS, correct? What is your advice on approaching medical professionals to make sure we are listened to? A very good question.
Yeah, so exactly that. This is exactly the problem at the moment. So I think the best thing to do is to look at good websites before you go to see your GP, so that you make things really easy for them. And the Tommy's does have excellent information. It's also important to know that you can choose where you get referred to. And as much of medicine is now done on the telephone post-COVID, because to be honest, it's actually cheaper and for everybody, then that's brilliant, because that means you can go anywhere in the country. So you can go to your GP. You know, you only need a telephone consultation. You don't need a face-to-face consultation. That means you're more likely to get one.
But what if you're not taken seriously? I had one doctor say to me, it was almost like he hexed me, "You will get pregnant," and then just sent me on my way. It's just one of those things. It happens to so many women. I was actually told that.
So the thing to say is, I've looked at I've looked on the Tommy's website. I'm aware that there are some tests that I should be having, and I'd like them to be done. You can list the tests because some of them they can easily do it if the general practitioner. And I would like to be referred for a second opinion. I've looked at the Tommy's website. I've chosen this clinic. I want to be referred to that clinic because then it makes it easy. They just have to write a letter saying this woman has had X number of miscarriages, and send the letter to the clinic. They don't actually have to do much. If you do want easy blood tests, full blood count, thyroid tests, it's really, really easy for the GP to do that. So I think I'm afraid it's not marvelous, but the thing to do is to make it easy for the GP. If you're not satisfied with what the GP says, you can of course see another GP in that practice, or you can change practices. But on the whole, I think if you go very well informed, it's very hard for them not to do what you've if you ask very specifically, I want these tests, I want to be referred, it's very hard for them not to do that.
Do you know what? You're absolutely right. I didn't know the questions to ask. So the fact that Tommy's have done the doctor's homework for them, you're right. It just takes all the pressure off and just gives you the exact questions that you need to be asking. So thank you. That's really helpful, actually. Arri, a question for you. Are missed miscarriages? Oh, I had one of those. Awful. I didn't even know what a missed miscarriage was until I had one. Are missed miscarriages included in Tommy's research? And are we finding out anything more about them?
Absolutely. So a missed miscarriage is where you have sadly miscarried, but you don't even know that you've miscarried.
You have so different kinds of miscarriage. That's also
yes.
I thought a miscarriage, sadly, I thought it wasn't what it was, but there is so many variations on it.
Yes. And I think missed miscarriages, it's one of the worst in that, you don't even have any bleeding, pain, but you've lost the pregnancy, and you only find out when you turn up for a scan, for example, and so it becomes like a complete out of the blue, unexpected shock to the woman, to the couple. Yes, absolutely. So we are looking at that. Recently, we looked at how we could help women who've had a missed miscarriage resolve that miscarriage. So different ways of managing that. But obviously, we are also focusing on how to prevent it in the first place. So the research that we do in terms of looking at the causes, is it to do with the genetic makeup of the baby? Is it to do with the lining of the uterus? So Professor Quenby and Professor Brosens, they are looking at the lining of the womb, the endometrium, to see if there may be a problem there that might be contributing to miscarriage. And Myleene, you mentioned the male partner contributing to the risk of miscarriage. This is really important. And this is a really important line of research at the moment. We know that if there are lots of fragmentations in the sperm's DNA, then that can more than double the risk of miscarriage in the female partner. So the question is, how do we address that? What's going on there? So I think there are really important questions that need to be answered about the causes of miscarriages and then how we address them. And missed miscarriage very much forms part of that research program.
Actually, I'm glad you touched on that, because there's another question here that says, is there research happening on sperm DNA fragmentation and miscarriage? So presumably that's good sperm and not so good sperm.
Absolutely. So I think we know that normally when we look at sperm, we look at the concentration of sperm, the number of sperm in a given volume, the motility of the sperm, how the sperm is moving, and also the shape of the sperms. That's the kind of standard analysis. But we can do more advanced tests on the sperm to see if there are lots of fragmentations, breaks in the DNA that is within the sperm. And we know that if there are high levels of those breaks, then the woman can get pregnant, but sadly, the pregnancy might end in a miscarriage. So the questions now are, what are the best ways to pick up DNA, high levels of DNA fragmentation? There are very many different tests that one can use. We need to understand what may be the best way to do it. And then the really important question, what do you do about it? If there are high levels of fragmentation in the sperm's DNA. Now, there are some
On an alcohol ban? Is it a paternal
thing? That's right. So there are some simple, perhaps not so simple, but there are some certain steps that people can take already, you know, to reduce fragmentation in the sperm. So reducing alcohol is definitely one of them. Stopping smoking, and eating food that is full of antioxidants. So that's fruits and vegetables, because it is the oxidants that damage the sperm's DNA. So if your food contains lots of antioxidants, fruits and vegetables, then that could be beneficial. So there are things that can be done. And then, of course, we need to ask the question, what can we do from a medical point of view? You know, are there interventions that we could offer? So that is very much, again, part of Tommy's work program.
It's so important. We actually, there are things that we can do and empower ourselves. They're just not given that information. It's so frustrating. Thank you so much, Arri. Siobhan, is progesterone only for women who are bleeding? When should treatments like progesterone and aspirin be started? I've already showed you my injections that were still left over. I don't know why I can't throw them out. It's just so connected to me. But yes, let's talk about progesterone and aspirin. Don't be frightened or ashamed to take any medicine that will help you.
So actually, those are actually all very good questions. And yeah, the bottom answer is we haven't really got clear answers through research. So the very good evidence is that if you have bleeding in early pregnancy, that progesterone does prevent you miscarrying. However, the evidence also suggests that if you've had a large number of miscarriages, for example, 5 miscarriages, that again, progesterone prevents miscarriage. So perhaps in those people, you should start it before you bleed. And then when's the best to start it? Well, you can start it as soon as you're pregnant if you've had a lot of miscarriages. If you've had 1 miscarriage before and you're bleeding, definitely start it then. The other question, which we haven't fully answered, is whether there's a group of people who have a thing called luteal phase insufficiency. So that means at the end of your cycle, there's inadequate progesterone production, and sometimes you get a bit of spotting at the end of the cycle. So some doctors start you on progesterone from the last week of your cycle, so day 21 of your cycle. But unfortunately, we haven't tested that with trials, but that's something that's being thought about. So I'm afraid exactly when the best time to start it, we aren't sure. And then all the doctors have to do is try and look at your whole history and do the best thing for you. Again, with aspirin, unfortunately, that different research tells you different things. So in Europe, they start it before you get pregnant. In this country, we tend to start it from as soon as you get pregnant. The problem with aspirin is that in early pregnancy, if you took too much aspirin, you may actually make implantation or make the baby sticking to the womb less good. So again, all these things are difficult. So we have, as the Tommy's team, come up with a compromise, which is we think the best compromise of all the data is to start the aspirin from as soon as you're pregnant as a 75 milligram dose, that's once a day. And then when you get to 10 weeks, to increase it to the 150 milligrams once a day.
Is that the same as baby aspirin? Because I was told to take baby aspirin, and then I remember getting to the chemist and they wouldn't give it to me because I was pregnant.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So you can just buy it from a supermarket shelf. So I tell people to just do that because it's so frustrating. Yeah.
Oh, I left in tears. I left in tears because obviously hormones and everything else. Yeah.
And due to Tommy's, what's happened is we've the Miscarriage Association have come up with that average opinion on all these difficult questions, because the problem is at the moment, if you ask different doctors, they're going to tell you something different, which is not at all helpful. And then these are going to be put down in special patient care guidelines, which we're going to put on the Tommy's website. And then we're all going to stick to the same story and try and solve the problem like that, because I totally appreciate it's not helpful if we all say something different. And so we're giving a nice average, opinion that as right as you can be. And the same with the injections. Again, we're going to come up with an average, care guideline that's on the Tommy's website that we will follow. And I think that'll help all doctors, because doctors don't want to tell you something different. But the evidence is so grey, it's actually very difficult to be precise on these things. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you for your honesty, Siobhan. I think what is becoming evident here more so than ever is just that everything needs to be consolidated, all of this research, and used as one en masse. So thank you. And with that in mind, Kath, there's a question here that says, when will the new Tommy's miscarriage tool be launched?
Thanks, Myleene. Well, as Siobhan says, we're working incredibly hard to get it ready because we think it's going to give some really good sort of fact-based evidence to people. Because I think one of the problems is that people do lots of, understandably, we all do it, lots of Googling, find out lots of things, some of which is true, some of which isn't true, and some of which is very scary and difficult to read. So we're really excited about this, and it will launch in the autumn, Myleene. So I hope that means that it won't be too long before people get something that they can use to give themselves better information and know what kind of care they should be able to ask for.
Thank you. I mean, there are so many questions coming through. Kath, if anyone's got any more questions after this event, or I didn't get my question answered, or I've just thought of this, where can they go?
Get myself off mute. The old problem. So they can. We've got a brilliant midwives helpline, which people can either phone or email. So you can, if you've got questions, particularly about your own situation and, questions about miscarriage, please come to us, because, we'd love to support you. And, we understand there's lots of questions that are coming in that people haven't been able to get answered today. So we're here for you.
You are, because I called Tommy's. I don't know if I've ever had that chat with you, Kath. I called you guys once, and you were. Thank you.
That's so good to hear.
I'd like to ask Arri, with all of these questions that are coming through, and with what's going on at the moment, how have surprised you that this hasn't been addressed sooner in government, and the fact that there's a potential that it might not be addressed? How does that make you feel?
Tremendously frustrated, and I think this would be shared by patients, it would be shared by clinicians who provide care, and by other stakeholders who care about miscarriage service. For a problem that is so prevalent, for a problem that has such profound effect on the woman and the couples. For a problem that goes beyond what happens, in that particular episode of care and has implications in the future, for that not to feature dominantly, in a strategy like this, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. I completely appreciate that there are lots of competing, important issues that are trying to find a place in this strategy. But miscarriage, it has a profound effect at scale throughout the country, and I think we need to continue to make the case to ensure that it gets the hearing that it deserves. But I am very disappointed and frustrated.
Especially as it's called the Women's Health Strategy. This affects women, and so many at that, and it is not being addressed. I find it staggering and hard to actually qualify as to how they can leave it off. But that's why we're here today, I guess. Thank you so much, Arri. There's one more question for you, actually, that I just want to squeeze in quickly before I go to Kath. Can recurrent miscarriage affect your ability to get pregnant again?
So couples who have miscarriages don't normally have a problem with getting pregnant. So they don't normally suffer infertility. Now, interestingly, some couples who have recurrent miscarriages are what we call super fertile. They actually get pregnant very easily. It is actually holding on to the pregnancy that is the issue. There are some women who do find it difficult to get pregnant, especially if they are older than, say, 35 years of age, and they haven't become pregnant in, say, 6 months of trying or so. Then they should seek healthcare consulting to see if they might have a degree of subfertility or infertility. But generally, women who have miscarriages don't have a problem with fertility, getting pregnant. The problem is more to do with retaining the pregnancy once they have become pregnant.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that also submitted a question. And as you heard, Kath, if there is a question that you've got that you've maybe not had answered, or you would like to discuss further, do get in touch with Tommy's, because their midwives are Amazing. I am interested, as I said before, in hearing from you, Kath. I want to talk about your greatest challenges. What are the greatest challenges for you at the moment and for Tommy's in reaching your goal?
Thanks, Myleene. Well, it's not, as others have said, it's not plain sailing, and this has gone on for some time. And we were so excited when, you know, we had the debate in Parliament.
I
and
thought we had it in the bag.
I know.
They said we will. We thought we were there, and then when the Royal College of Obs and Gynaes said we actually, you know, we support these changes as well, I thought it was a done deal. How foolish.
Absolutely. Well, and I guess there's, you know, this is a long journey, and we have to accept that, and we're not going to, you know, we're going to keep pushing on this very, very hard. So we feel very committed to that. I mean, I think there's a number of challenges. One is that we've had a change of health minister. So Nadine Dorries was incredibly moved, I think, and supportive of Olivia Blake when she spoke so inspiringly and bravely in Parliament about her own experience of miscarriage during lockdown. And we did get commitment at that point, but we've now got a new health minister who's, you know, got probably been, well, certainly been less vocal of her support of this particular area. So we've got kind of work to do there.
I would love to get her to a round table at the very least.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important that, you know, so many of you on this call have written to your MP, because the campaign that we're running now to push to make sure that MPs are talking to the Minister for Health and pushing around the women's health strategy is so important, and getting that kind of, you know, getting it back on the radar is what we're doing now. And I guess the other thing is, although in some ways it's worked in our favour potentially, is that the delay in the publication of the women's health strategy, so we don't know what's in it yet, and we are pushing and making and, you know, doing everything we possibly can to make sure that miscarriage gets included. You know, there have been some questions, I think, about, you know, the women's health strategy is a 10-year strategy, so, you know, does that really solve the problem? Because Arri and Siobhan have talked about what an incredibly difficult and major problem it is. My answer to that would be it gets it started, at least, you know, it gets it on the radar, and for it to be in the women's health strategy would be so important, because it would then allow us to, you know, that sets government agenda, you know, that sets agendas. So if it's there, it means that then, you know, things will happen as a result of it. So I think, and then I guess the only other thing I would say is turning guidance into care is a challenge, you know, so having it in the guidelines is brilliant, and, you know, that's a massive win, but everything is very stretched. Everybody knows, you know, how stretched health budgets are. There's always so many, you know, there are so many issues to deal with. So we're going to have to do a lot of pushing, I think, to make sure that it moves from the point at which it's in a guideline to actually being the thing that people experience, you know, if they go through the tragedy of having a miscarriage. So loads of work to do, I'm afraid, but we are determined to do everything we can with all the wonderful people we've got around us, including people on this call, to help us to get as far as we can.
Absolutely, we need their support. You have loud voices, you have people that follow and listen to you. So yes, get them signing, please, if you would. Kath, call to arms. What are the next steps?
Well, I mean, there are some really good things happening. So the graded model of care is being tested at a number of sites, and there might be stuff that Arri wants to add on that, you know, and that's important because that gives that sort of evidence base, I guess, to show that this can work, you know, and it works really powerfully. We've talked about the miscarriage tool being launched in the autumn. That's a key thing for us, because that means that people will have access really easily to great information that they can then arm themselves with. And we've also, again, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but we're looking very much at later term miscarriages, because I think that's one that, you know, that's been in the shadows a bit, and that kind of funny grey area between, you know, a late miscarriage is, you know, not defined as a stillbirth, just as devastating. I mean, all miscarriages can be absolutely devastating, but there's more that we need to understand about those later term miscarriages and how we can support people through that. So we're doing lots of work in that space as well.
Yeah, I found things that surprised me were, you know, that you have half an idea, I suppose, of how you might feel. You know, you'll be devastated, but there are things I did not expect. I didn't expect having to sit in the same room as other pregnant women as I got my scans. That is barbaric, and I understand that. Where else would they have put me? And they didn't know the news they were going to deliver. But isn't there a back door? Aren't there other procedures in place? There's just no planning there. It just seems so cruel. And also, when I did go for my D&Cs, again, I was not fit to fill in that paperwork. I had to tick a box to decide what would happen to the remains of, or the products of pregnancy. You know, that was my baby, but I had to tick a box if I wanted ashes and prayers or a burial or slides. I found that really torturous. Looking back now, I understand why I would have been asked those questions, but that was not the time to tick those boxes. You know, what do you feel on that, Kath?
Well, I guess that's why it just shows that that kind of being sensitive to people's needs is so important. And I think, you know, there is, I'm sure in that instance, people were trying to be helpful, but actually, you know, taking things on an individual basis and supporting you in the way that you needed to be supported, you know, clearly wasn't quite right for you there. So I think that sensitivity and, you know, making sure that people, as you say, aren't in a situation where they're sitting waiting for the results of, you know, around their miscarriage with people who are pregnant. And there are lots of places where that doesn't happen. So we know it can happen really well. And that's why we're trying to create this kind of graded model of care and a much more systematic approach that will be available for everybody, rather than it being, you know, it depends where you live, which is the old postcode lottery, which we just have to be able to move away from.
To add to that, if I may.
Please do, please, Arri.
Thank you. So the way that the services have developed throughout the UK has mostly been as follows. You know, someone like Siobhan, who is committed to providing excellent miscarriage care, would work in her own time without any support, without any resources, without really much help at all, and develop a service and run it. You know, the investment in terms of providing good services for miscarriage care just hasn't been there at all levels. And that has been a huge problem. So you find that different types of services have been set up in different places, mostly on the basis of some committed clinicians or healthcare providers setting these services up. What we need is a proper strategy. We need a clear plan to move forward. And I think Tommy's and the Tommy's Center for Miscarriage Research has been very important in that. I mean, Tommy's, when they said we want to have a center that is dedicated to miscarriage care and research, that was the first of that kind, and that needed to be there to give, to organize our thoughts and really pursue the matter with a degree of vigor and a clear plan. But I think a lot of work still needs to be done, and I think we need to recognize miscarriage service and research is grossly underfunded. You know, the resources just aren't there. It's a poor midwife, a poor nurse, you know, one or two poor clinicians trying to do the best that they can with practically nothing.
No,
and
you're
that
right.
must change. That absolutely must change.
You're right. My own midwife, who also went through a miscarriage, said to me, there's no name for what you are going through. There's no ward. There's no department, because if you have your baby, then there's a very clear department for where you have your baby. And if you are trying to get pregnant, we even have, or just before that, but when you've lost your baby, you're in no man's land. As anyone who's experienced a miscarriage will tell you, you are literally in no man's land. We have nowhere to put you. And that is why we're here. That's what we'd like to have, would like to see change. So thank you. I'd love to spend another 3 hours talking with you. Professor Arri, thank you. Professor Siobhan, thank you so much for your time. And of course, Kath, thank you for the work that you're doing, and Tommy's and everybody that has joined this call today. Thank you for your support. It's very brave of you. Do remember, if you are going through a miscarriage, Tommy's also offers great support and advice. Do not hesitate to call them or message the team today, if need be, as we said. Now, as we have heard today, the work isn't finished. There's still so much that we need to improve with miscarriage care and treatment. Now, this is our last chance to make sure the government listens to our voices. You've heard what we've said here today. I have been working as hard as I can to keep miscarriage in the public eye. As you've seen, I find it very difficult to talk about, but I'm still carrying on because I know how important it is for myself, for my friends, for my daughters, my son. He might have a partner who goes through this. It affects all of us. So if we can, we have to continue using the voices that we have. New miscarriage guidelines are being developed based on Tommy's Lancet findings, but we do need to make sure that they are put into action in hospitals across the country. And it's vital that aren't forgotten, that they don't just sit on the shelf, they don't just sit there. And we do know there's still more research that we need to do, and it is thanks to supporters like yourself that Tommy's National Centre for Miscarriage Research is making breakthroughs which are transforming care. I've got some figures here that I couldn't believe. So did you know that Tommy's is one of the top 5 funders for pregnancy research? No surprise there. But for every £1 the NHS spends on pregnancy-related care, just 1p is spent on research. I'm just going to put that into some context. It's not a competition by far, but just compare that to cancer. Cancer has 12p, heart disease has 7p. So I think you'll all agree that that needs to change, in addition to these other charities who are doing great work. With more investment in research, we can find the answers to prevent the devastation of pregnancy and baby loss. Now, the incredible professors that we've met today, they've shown us that, but it does cost. So if you aren't already donating, if you could, please head to Tommy's and consider doing so. So like I said, finally, I would like to thank you all for supporting Tommy's, their mission to make the UK the safest place in the world to give birth. I've asked you again, please spread the word to get the signatures down for the Women's Health Strategy. Let's make our voices heard more so than ever. And thank you again on a personal note for all the work that you are all doing. Together, we can give parents the best possible chance of a happy, healthy pregnancy, and ultimately, we can help save babies' lives.